Kurt, let's go straight to New Orleans, Phoenix for this recap to start off PBT Extra. It looks as though the Suns are still the top dog, potentially even without Devin Booker, but New Orleans is not going out without a fight. What did you take away from this recap, Game 5?
Yeah, the Suns played up to their potential defensively. Other guys have to step up without Booker there. And, obviously Chris Paul did, and I think he got a little fire under them the way he played early. But then somebody else had to step up, and it was Mikal Bridges. Mikal Bridges has the monster game. And he was 4-4 from 3. He was getting to the rim. He was finishing everything at the rim. That gave them the boost they needed. Look, they're the better team. Their defense stepped up. But you're right. Like, Pelicans team is going to go home. They're still fired up, and they've got to be thinking, man, we win Game 6. You get into a Game 7, anything can happen, right? Like, that they're wired for this. And without Booker, I still think Phoenix is vulnerable, and I'd be shocked if we saw him in this series, considering the severity of his hamstring injury.
Yeah, the thing that I keep thinking about in my mind, I'm like, what are the likelihood, right? It's all probabilities, right? So in my mind, I'm thinking, and by the way, I was never very good at math. So, but I just want to preface this statement with that disclaimer. But I was thinking, okay, well, when Devin Booker had, 31 points before halftime, before he left that game, New Orleans came back and won. I was like, wow, that's pretty amazing. First and foremost, let's just give New Orleans credit there. Brandon Ingram had like a 37-point double-double. And we know Monty Williams back to Chris Paul now, double-double. I'm thinking, well, what's the likelihood that Brandon Ingram has another 37-point game? Three more 37-point games, right? Or Monty Williams makes adjustments, makes Brandon Ingram go in the low 20s or so, and then the rest of the players kind of pick up the slack in Devin Booker's absence. And I think we're seeing that play out, and that's why the Suns are the better team, all in all. But like you said, Game 7, everything else goes out the door, right? Now it's just like you got to get one. And all you got to do is just get one. And we've seen it go back and forth. And I find that very, very interesting with this New Orleans team, because if you would have asked me 2 months ago, Kurt, New Orleans, I'd be like, oh, no, they're dead in the water. Like New Orleans doesn't really have that soul. CJ McCollum comes in. There's like belief, that play-in game. I've never seen New Orleans, that arena, look like that. And now you have Game 6 back in New Orleans. It really is pretty interesting. On paper, I'm like the Suns, but the way the momentum is shifting and energy, and every athlete knows, look, like energy is very important when you're playing in that environment. New Orleans has something going.
Yeah, and they've got two guys who can take over a game and win it, right? McCollum is capable of it too. He is capable of putting up huge numbers. And Ingram is just the perfect playoff player. He's so smooth. But, he's also just so tall, and he's got that Kevin Durant high release thing where it just is really hard to block his shot or cause him trouble, even if you're Herb Jones. So, yeah, I think they've got a shot, especially at home. And like we said, we get to Game 7 and you don't know. Phoenix is the better, deeper team. I love Willie Green, but I trust Monty Williams to use all those options to his advantage. But they're going to have to fight for this, and they struggle through the first round, and then they get into the second round, and they're probably going to get Luka Doncic. And if you don't have Booker back for that, then you could be in trouble. Like that, if that's the 1-4, they're going to need Booker in that series.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like short-term, long-term. If I'm Phoenix, I'm thinking, obviously, you got to win the series. But then, down the road, without Booker, this is a whole different playoff picture. And then in the immediate, like I said, I think New Orleans, they're giving belief to a city. And this is all pre-Zion. You think Zion with this group, who knows how good they could be. I just want to give a quick shout-out to Jose Alvarado, because the way that he's been playing on Chris Paul, just like, it's almost like that. It's like that energy of like a Bruce Bowen type of energy, like you're just all over him. And I cannot get over that one play where he stole the ball and he looked at the ref and was like, wait a second, was that a foul? And it was not. And he just started like yelling like a lion. The entire arena went crazy. And I'm thinking, okay, you got Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton, you got Bridges, who's finalist for Defensive Player of the Year, Brandon Ingram, who's like ice in his veins, and all the cameras can't get away from Alvarado. And I think that's kind of the whole point is with this New Orleans team is, they're like the engine that could. And as just as a sports fan, that is a really compelling story to me. Like the belief that you can rally around Alvarado, you can rally around all these guys like Valanciunas, who comes in now is playing really well for this team. So, yeah, and Willie Green, it's hard not to root for this New Orleans team.
Yeah, it is. And by the way, Alvarado forced 2 8-second counts on Chris Paul. Do you know how hard that is to do? Chris Paul, man, I how can you not love watching Alvarado play? How can you not love watching this team? They are so much fun. You're right. And this is the kind of season they need to build on. Whatever happens the rest of this series, they have built something now with CJ being the glue that pulls it all together. They've built something that can going forward be very interesting.
Now, one team that I thought was going to build on something last year was Atlanta, and they were my dark horse pick. Obviously, I was wrong. they got beat 4-1 by Miami. Miami still looks very, very good. But I wanted to just hear your general takeaways from that series, Atlanta and Miami. What'd you love from both teams? What'd you hate from both teams? And how are they going to fare in the next? Miami going to fare in the next round?
I love what I saw from Miami. I mean, yes, they didn't have. They won that last game without Jimmy Butler and without Kyle Lowry, which is a testament to their culture and defense and everything else. Their defense got them through this series, but Jimmy Butler had the 45-point game. He had a couple huge games, and that's what they're going to need from him going forward. It's, Philadelphia or Toronto in the next round. Either way, it's a step up, and you're going to have to get more. I think that they are capable of maybe coming out of the East, but you have to have peak Jimmy Butler playing in that half court, creating for them, and then Kyle Lowry coming back and maybe being the secondary creator, because he's their, depending on what you think of Tyler Hero, their second or third best. But anyway, I came out of that thinking, yeah, they look like contenders, and I can see them in the Eastern Conference Finals being a real challenge for whoever else they face. For Atlanta, look, I don't think Atlanta's as bad as they looked, but they've got some real questions to answer now. They've paid John Collins. What are you getting from John Collins? But to me, the big one is Miami was able to concentrate on Trae Young and make life really difficult. Trae Young had this all-NBA level season, and in this series, he had 22 made buckets and 30 turnovers. They were able to make his life difficult. He wasn't able to overcome it, but what was their second option? I mean, DeAndre Hunter had a nice game in that last game, but they got to go get a number two. Or it's the same problem Dallas had for a while until they found Brunson and Dinwiddie a little bit. If you don't have a number two and I can just load up on your number one, I don't care how good he is. That player can only take you so far.
Yeah, but Bogdanović was supposed to be that number two. Remember in that free agency last year, it got to the Eastern Conference Finals, and that looked tenable at that time. But then it's just from that moment to this all season long, it's kind of been a drop off. And you're right. I guess how successful is that pairing?
Yeah, you've got to. I'm not sure that they can do that. Bogdanović had some really nice defensive plays, and that's the other end of the court that they've got to shore up. They were not a great defensive team this year, and if DeAndre Hunter helps a lot with that, Bogdanović can. But if you're playing Trae Young, you're covering for a guy. He's not going to be a great defender. He can be better, but they've got to get some switchable athletic wings in there, which, that sounds great. There are 29 other teams trying to get switchable athletic wings. That is the prime player right now. Everybody's looking for those guys. So they've got some roster construction to do and to figure out what they are, but I still don't think they're that far away. I don't think they were necessarily as good as their run last year, but I don't think they were as bad as they came off this year. I think they also went into a regular. Did it feel to you like they went into the regular season? They even said that, this is kind of boring compared to the playoffs, and they didn't build good habits and take it seriously. And I think they learned a hard lesson about needing to do that.
Yeah, Kurt, there's this old saying in sports, we go as you go. It's like the leader. And it's when Trae Young is that guy, right? It's funny because early on, at the very beginning of the season, I remember reading there was an ESPN cover story about Trae Young. And Lou Williams, his coach, were both saying he's a very talented player, but you can tell he kind of fades in the locker room. That's the next step for him. They were very honest and forthcoming about this, the next development step for Trae Young. And I understand he's in his early 20s. I understand he's very, very, very young. No pun intended there. But I do think that that's a real thing for this team. This is where New Orleans had a very young franchise player in Zion Williamson. Obviously not the same because Zion's only played a few games comparatively, but C.J. McCollum brought that to the next level. Phoenix Suns, they had Devin Booker balling every year, getting better and better. DeAndre Ayton at the time, well, you're like, what are we getting from you? I thought we were going to get something better. And then with Chris Paul, it's like, oh, that's the Ayton we thought we were going to get. That's Devin Booker on another level if that was possible. It's just continue to trend upwards, right? But they needed the stability. And I think that's what Atlanta needs because And right now, Trae Young needs to learn from someone. And the issue is in this business, it's so rare to have stability at the franchise player position and someone you can learn from. And I think the best example of that would be Tim Duncan, right? Like you had Kawhi learn from Tim, right? And then Kawhi obviously moved on and won a championship in Toronto, and now he's in LA. But to learn from a Hall of Famer like Tim Duncan, that is just rare. Yeah. And I think that's, if I'm Atlanta, I'm thinking, okay, well, how can I put Trae Young in that position where there's somebody that he can learn from in the league that's older, 10, 11-year veteran who knows how to do this well. Everyone else will just, it's going to click. But they don't have that. So that's my biggest thing with Atlanta.
Yeah, I think you're right on. I think that some locker room, that locker room presence, that leadership that Tim Duncan brought, you can bring it in different ways. Tim Duncan brought it, Kobe brought it. Not exactly the same personalities, right? But like you can bring that leadership in a variety of ways. And some guys do it naturally. It just comes to them. And some guys kind of have to learn that. Young's definitely he has to learn that side of it. But I like you said, he is young. He has time to do it. He's just, I don't know who you bring in, but there are guys out there who would.
But there are options too, because look at Miami, Kurt. You know, Chris, like they have Haslam. And that was their workaround. Is like, we got a guy who's been here forever. And he's like basically an assistant coach who's on the team. And that was the way that they had the stability. And it works out very, very well for that organization. So you don't necessarily need a Tim Duncan, Hall of Fame, one of the best players to ever play to be in that position. And you also kind of don't need, Chris Paul, who can also give you, a double-double in his late 30s. Like there's a balance here of, there is a spectrum, but Atlanta needs a Haslam. They need a Chris Paul. They need a CJ McCollum. They need a Tim Duncan. They need something to give to shore up and anchor that team. And I think Miami, on the other hand, is doing a phenomenal job of just saying, like, I don't know how they're under the radar, but they have been, and they're thriving. So to think that you can like be in Miami and still be quote unquote like small market as far as the media attention is concerned, for that team is perfect. And they go as Jimmy Butler goes. And it's like mysterious. He's like one of the Coach Bolster said he's like one of the most interesting men in the world. And you can kind of see that with this Miami team. It's like, man, they just keep surprising you. They have aces in their sleeves. It's just, and they're low key in Miami. It's pretty amazing.
They are loaded with the Gabe Vincent, Caleb Martin, Max Strus guys who didn't get drafted or were late second round or were forgotten, who they've turned into quality rotation players that they can lean on in the playoffs. And there's just not many organizations that can do that.
They'll be playing the winner of Philadelphia-Toronto, and I know that was your dark horse, Toronto. What got into them, Kurt?
I think it's more what happened to Philly a little bit. Well, first off, Joel Embiid dominated the start of the series. He was just so good. The thumb injury seems to have slowed. Everybody's playing through stuff, but he's not been quite the same offensive force. And so you need other guys to step up, right? And James Harden hasn't done that. James Harden's been, he hasn't put up bad numbers, but he's been okay this series for what he can be. And I think they need, they had some really good games out of Tyrese Maxey at the start. Weirdly, when Fred VanVleet, who's this all defensive level player, goes out, he was just banged up. He was playing on that bad knee. He was trying to fight through it. When he went out and they were able to replace him with long, athletic, switchable guys, and that's what makes Toronto so hard to play against, is we've talked about this. They're all 6'4" to 6'9". They switch everything. They're long and athletic, and if Embiid can't punish them inside, Harden's got to be able to find a way to do more, and he hasn't. So I think that's part of it, but I think Toronto kind of always believed in themselves. They have the better coach in this series, with all due respect to Doc Rivers. Nick Nurse is really creative. They go home for Game 6. That place is going to be on fire. That is a loud, hard-to-play arena. And then, like we were talking about in the other series, you get with New Orleans. If Toronto can get to a Game 7, even on the road, you get to the Game 7, anything can happen. They've got Pascal Siakam. They've got guys who can light it up for a night, and you never know. I think I generally don't – I'd still bet on the Philadelphia. I still think winning 4 in a row would be so hard in this series. But they got a chance, don't they?
Look, it's like at a certain point, playoffs become like a Bruce Lee movie. It's like Game of Death. Anything can happen. and it's like all stakes, so that in that sense, I'm ready. My seatbelt's buckled. I'm ready to watch this movie. But it is fascinating when you do bring up that concept of like the creativity and the length of Toronto, because you mentioned this early on. And you kind of brought my attention there. They're kind of like an octopus, you know. So think about like, how do you attack an octopus? That's a very fascinating idea, just like from a basketball concept. And we saw one of the favorite things from from the series so far, or from the playoffs, is I remember on the NBA on TNT crew asking Jason Tatum, how did you guys stop Kevin Durant? Right. And it was the same kind of concept. It's like, you know, you're not going to stop him. You know, you're not going to hold Kevin Durant to 10 points. Just like, you know, you're not going to hold Joel Embiid or James Harden to 10 points, you know, and KD exploded that last game, but it was too little too late. Right. So the concept is, well, how do you just throw enough stuff at him where he starts thinking? And if Kevin Durant's thinking, he's not playing like Kevin Durant. And that is like the number one thing in any defensive team. Like Bill Russell would say this too. When I'm playing defense, I'm not reactive. I'm not reactionary. I'm actually the one dictating, because I'm going to make you play the shot I want you to play, right? Versus the shot that you want to take. I know your spots. I've seen the film. So I'm going to make you take the shot. So when defense is actionary and you're like an octopus, then it's like, okay, well, players have to think. And when James Harden and Joel Embiid are thinking, they're not playing in the flow state at their best level.
Exactly. And I think that they got them there. And they've also hit some shots. They've played a little better. But I also think Philadelphia's got a chance. And then they're home. They get Matisse Thybulle, although Thybulle hasn't been what they've needed. He's a challenging player to put out there, because you get the stops, you get the good defense, you get the elite long defender. But I can help off of him. He just doesn't. It's not only that he can't really shoot threes well, it's that he doesn't shoot them, right? And so I don't have to fear him taking the corner three. And the deeper you get in the playoffs, the more you go against good teams. And I'm looking for places to attack. I'm looking for weak links. It becomes harder to play Thybulle heavy minutes, because I feel like I can help off him and make my defense better. So it's going to be interesting. I would love to look smart and think Toronto comes back and win this, but I still got a feeling Philadelphia is going to find a way to win 1 out of 2. That Joel Embiid is going to be able. He is that MVP level. I can take over a game player. I think he's got one of those in him.
Yeah, he's an MVP finalist for a reason, right?
Exactly.
Another series that I'm dying to get your take on: Dallas, Utah. We thought this could be a toss-up, the way that Utah was coming in, and then Luka went out. Right now he's back. You look at the past couple games Luka's put together. It's talk about efficiency. He's playing like 33 minutes or so, 30-point double-doubles. It's just like back to Luka. But Donovan Mitchell now is questionable. What direction does this series take now?
If I'm a Utah Jazz player, I can start booking my vacation in Bali.
Really? It's that time?
Well, Cancun's overrated, right? There's just too many people there. So yeah, we're gonna do Bali. No, I think it is. I think it's that point where they're in a lot of trouble. And I think you saw it the last 2 games. When they tied at 2-2, when the Jazz won that game, that was everything I think we could hope for and wanted to see out of the Jazz. Donovan Mitchell had a good game. He's throwing a lob at crunch time to Rudy Gobert. Their defense was the most active and strongest it had been all series. Jordan Clarkson went off. Everything went right for them. They played their best game, and they still needed to come back from 4 points down in the final minute to win it. It switches, and look, in Game 5, everything went right for Dallas. Everything went wrong for Utah. It was a thrashing, right? I think Dallas is just better and more confident now, and they believe they figured out how to win this thing. And even if Donovan plays, I got a feeling he's a little slowed, and they just don't have another shot creator. Mike Conley's just not that guy anymore. So I got a feeling it's over for Utah, which is going to lead to a really interesting offseason there, and Dallas will be moving on. But I feel like Utah had its chance early in the series, and when they couldn't get wins when Luka was out, or not enough. When they were down 2-1 by the time Luka came back, it was too late.
Yeah, when I look at Utah, the word that comes to my mind is erosion. And, it just seems as though since the bubble, we've just seen them kind of recede. It's like, and I don't know what it is, because there's been conversations around like Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, their relationship, right? And it's just like, that's a lot of noise and all this stuff. But it just seems like everything is just like it doesn't make sense to me because I have an owner who wants to spend, there's excitement around the team. They have Quinn Snyder. We talked about this last year where it's like, this is the best constructed team in the NBA at the time, and now it's the Suns. But
yeah.
And then in this series, like they put their best effort, like you mentioned, and still, right? It's kind of like, what is going on here? Even when they're playing well, they seem like they're in a weakened state. And I don't know why. I don't know if that's a fair assessment. But just watching this team over the past couple of years, I just can't help but think about erosion, and that is problematic. When you have a player like Donovan Mitchell, and you know how the NBA is. Like people, as soon as they think, "Hey, wait, are you unhappy?" In today's NBA, you don't know what's going to happen. People force themselves out of everything. So my point is that it's a really interesting dynamic that you're describing here, where they already tried to tinker around the edges with getting rid of Joe Ingles. So moving on there, and so Utah is confusing to me. And you look on the other hand, Dallas, it's like only up. They held it together. Jalen Brunson has done a phenomenal job, much like Bridges, where in the Phoenix Sun series, Bridges stepped in when necessary. Brunson was able to carry that load in Luka's absence. And then now Luka's back. It's just like, man, like this team can only get better. And this is a great example for Luka because he's never been out of the first round, right? So if you think about Luka in the playoffs moving forward, particularly after his kind of like salt in the wound, humbling moment of the Olympics, right? I remember I was there and I watched him right after they lost that game. He was just like sitting on the bench, just you could see a cloud. He didn't talk to anybody, and I just remember he walked right by me. He walked into the locker room, and I'm thinking, this is one of those like, if this is a documentary, circle it. Like some editor needs to bring in this moment. There's gonna be photos from this, and then you go into the season like, oh, Luka doesn't look as great with the physical health. Like, is he in like shape? All of these things coming together, I think this is going to be a huge moment, a huge blossoming on a big stage for Luka Doncic.
I think you're right about Luka. With the Jazz, doesn't it just feel like it's run its course? Like you tried, you put together this great roster, you did everything right. It didn't quite work out, and it's time to try something new. And whether that's rebuilding around Donovan Mitchell or what this ultimately ends up looking like is a really good question. It's not going to be that easy to just, hey, we'll just tear it down. They're not going there. This team is too good to tear it all the way down. You got to retool it on the fly. A la Clippers, right? Like, hey, we can get rid of Chris Paul and Blake Griffin and in a couple of years be right back here. If you do it right, I think you're going to see them try to do that. But with Dallas, Dallas kept looking and looking and looking for that second shot creator, and it turned out it was the guy on the bench, right? Now with Brunson there and Dinwiddie and playing their 5-out lineups with Kleber are that's really tough to defend, man.
But remember, even with the same Dallas team, there was a time when we thought, oh, Kristaps, Luka, So so it was the same kind of thing where we were tinkering around the edges there, just trying to figure out, well, what works in Dallas. And like you mentioned, just look on the bench. Jalen's the guy, right? Yeah. So it's kind of funny how that works. So there is a dynamic here where it's like you're somewhere in between, right? So if you have a guy like Luka and you have a guy like Zion, there are certain guys where just like, look, all chips in, we'll figure it out. If it takes us 20 years, we'll figure it out, right? Giannis, we'll figure it out, and they did. They got Drew Holiday, right? They got Chris Middleton. They figured it out. Now the question with Donovan Mitchell, is he one of those guys? And then you have to figure out, well, is this just like a Dallas scenario? Does someone around him, so it's yeah, you're right. I have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah. And I think the thing they are worried about, I know the thing that they are worried about in Utah is, does Donovan want to be there? Does he want to be there long term? He's got 3 years and a player option still in his contract. They don't have to trade him. There's not pressure to trade him, but it's really hard to rebuild around a guy if he wants out. So we'll have to, like I said, there's a lot of moving parts there this offseason.